And on the 9th day, God looked down on his earthly inhabitants and said, for them, I need a caretaker. So God made a doctor. God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, pre-round, dress wounds, consent for surgery, round again, drink 2 sips of coffee, prep, drape, scrub in, and be ready for timeout by 7:30. So God made a doctor. I need somebody with arms strong enough to replace joints, yet gentle enough to sew in place a detached retina and deliver a premature infant. Somebody to make house calls, travel to Honduras and Haiti and the Dominican Republic and Africa and Bangladesh and call that her vacation. Someone to come home late and then go to a meeting of the town council or the parent-teacher conference. So God made a doctor. God said, I need somebody willing to sit up all night with a sick great-grandmother and listen to her stories about the Depression and the war and good times, and watch her die and dry the eyes of her children with his words of compassion and sorrow. I have to have someone who loves to learn and loves to teach, someone who will sit for an hour with an M2 and tell them to follow the Costanzo method, or teach them about mud piles, or encourage them to keep an open mind during their M3 year. I must have someone who will give a tour or teach FCM the day before an exam. So God made a doctor. And then, said God, when that doctor is only 40 hours into his 80-hour week, I will ask him to give me more than he feels able to give, because his patients need him there. When everyone else is eating Thanksgiving dinner with family and friends, he'll settle for turkey and gravy in the hospital cafeteria, because the sick and frail don't get a holiday either. I need someone with steady hands and focused eyes who can sedate, medicate, intubate, and ventilate. Somebody who can listen with patience to the depressed, manic, schizophrenic, and suicidal. Someone who can treat the stones, bones, moans, and groans. I must have someone who will run to the bedside for a stroke or seizure, call codes and rule out sepsis. So God made a doctor. I need someone to place chest tubes and peg tubes, lavage and triage, incise and drain, cast, splint, staple, and suture, all before a noon conference. She needs to know Virchow's triad and Reynolds pentad, Weber, Rene, Ortolani, Barlow, Gray, Turner, Brown, and Sicard, and whether Babinski points up or down. So God made a doctor. God said, give me somebody brave enough to stand at the threshold of an emergency room and keep his mind clear as the ambulance arrives, yet tender enough to play peekaboo with a 3-year-old before he has surgery or he gets his eardrums examined. Someone devoted enough to work for 50 years in a rural practice, with a memory sharp enough to remember whose grandkid made the winning touchdown at the homecoming game 4 years ago, and trustworthy enough for that football star to tell him what's been troubling him lately. So God made a doctor. I need somebody kind-hearted enough to tell her patients to call her any time, and wake up at home at 3 a.m. to hear about how the neighbor down the hill has the chills and shakes and 103-degree fever, and walk down the road in the middle of a snowstorm to check on her. Someone who will give a subjective, objective assessment and plan every day, 10 times a day. Someone who will write H&Ps, check ADLs and IADLs, give an MMSC and count up points for a CHADS 2 and GCS. Someone who will question and cage, calculate a due date with an LMP and an anion gap for DKA, and APGARs, BMIs, GFRs, and UOPs. I need someone who will work long and hard and not cut corners, whose first vow and last act will both be to do no harm, and after a tough week's work will swing by the nursing home on her way to her kid's soccer game. Someone with the foresight to know that he'll someday depend on those he taught to take care of himself, and reflect on the thousands of lives he touched along the way. Somebody who'd bail a family together with the soft, strong bonds of selflessness and sharing, who would laugh and then sigh, with a smile in reply when his son says that he wants to spend his life doing what Dad does. So God made a doctor.